He's naked from the waist down near a toilet, and he's singing a song to you.
To me, yes.
And you're naked.
Yes. And
Okay.
I'm trying to towel down, and Elvis is singing, and I'm...
Before they ever locked eyes in a smoky Las Vegas lounge, Elvis Presley and Tom Jones lived in entirely different worlds, worlds that would soon collide in the most unexpected way. Tom Jones wasn't always the confident, hip-thrusting Welsh powerhouse we know today. In the industrial town of Pontypridd, Wales, a young boy named Thomas John Woodward was growing up in a modest working-class home, surrounded by coal miners and chapel hymns. He sang at family gatherings, school choirs, and pubs long before he'd ever hold a microphone on the Vegas Strip. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, a revolution was brewing in Memphis, Tennessee. Elvis Presley, the son of a truck driver, was creating a sound that would forever change music. Fusing gospel, blues, and country, Elvis took Black American musical traditions and filtered them through a white Southern boy's voice. In the 1950s, America had never heard anything like it, and they couldn't get enough. But here's what most people don't know. Long before Tom ever stood on a stage, he idolized Elvis. He listened to his records in awe. That curled lip, the deep voice, the raw energy. It lit a fire in Tom's soul. Even in Wales, Elvis was a god. In interviews, Tom often recalled how his mother would let him stay up late to watch Elvis on television. He once said, "The first time I heard Heartbreak Hotel, I didn't know what hit me. It was dangerous, it was alive. But at that time, the idea that he, a kid from a coal town, might one day meet Elvis, let alone earn his respect, that seemed impossible." Tom's rise wasn't overnight. He sang in clubs, took odd jobs, and supported a young family while hustling through the unforgiving British music scene. It wasn't until 1965, with his breakout hit, It's Not Unusual, that Tom catapulted to stardom. The velvet voice, the sexual energy, the primal scream, all uniquely Tom, yet undeniably inspired by the king. By the mid-60s, he wasn't just a singer, he was a force of nature. Meanwhile, Elvis was navigating a different storm. By then, he had returned from the army, made dozens of Hollywood films, and become trapped in a glittering cage of celebrity and bad contracts. His influence was global, but his freedom was shrinking. The Colonel kept him on a tight leash. Even so, his legend continued to grow. Two men. Two continents. Two powerful voices that could silence a room. Their paths were about to cross, but not in a recording studio or award show. It would happen somewhere far more intimate, a place where ego and image were checked at the door. It's fitting, really. A city built on spectacle where lights never go out and secrets stay buried in neon-lit corridors. In that shimmering desert mirage, the king of rock and roll would finally meet the voice from Wales. It was 1965. Las Vegas was electric. A desert kingdom of blinking marquees and velvet-draped ballrooms. The Rat Pack ruled the nights, and showrooms pulsed with champagne-soaked glamour. In this world of tuxedos and temptation, two legends were about to collide. Not on stage, but in a hotel hallway. Tom Jones had just begun his first residency in Vegas. It's Not Unusual had made him a sensation, and the desert city welcomed him like royalty. Still in his 20s, Tom was riding a rocket, and yet nothing could prepare him for what happened one fateful night at the Flamingo Hotel. He'd just finished a set, sweat still glistening, adrenaline still rushing, when a hotel staffer whispered, "Elvis is here. He's backstage." He thought it was a joke. Elvis Presley, the man whose records he wore thin as a boy, the legend who seemed more myth than man. But it was true. Standing in the dressing room doorway was Elvis himself. Sunglasses on, black leather jacket, jet black hair like a crown of ink. Tom later described it as surreal. Elvis didn't just walk in, he glided. There was a quiet aura about him, an almost unnatural calm, like a man aware of his own gravity. That was it. The ice broken, the wall shattered. The king of rock and roll had just paid homage to the voice of Wales. They didn't talk about fame or charts or money. They talked about music, soul, gospel. The stuff that made their hearts race. Tom later recalled. We talked for hours about Mahalia Jackson, Jackie Wilson, and the blues singers we both loved. That's what bonded us. Not the fame, not the success. The roots. The two of them jammed right there in Tom's dressing room. No cameras, no entourage. Just two vocal giants trading verses, harmonizing over spirituals and rhythm and blues classics. Imagine that. Two of the most powerful voices in modern music, singing gospel like choir boys in a backstage room lined with mirrors and crushed velvet. The king and the voice, raw and unfiltered. That night marked the beginning of something rare in show business. A friendship that wasn't built on politics or publicity, but on admiration and art. Elvis wasn't there to upstage Tom. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there because he heard something in Tom's voice. Something real. Something that reminded him of what he loved about music before the fame, the films, and the circus swallowed him whole. That moment, that meeting, was pure. And Tom knew, in a town that thrived on illusion, this was something authentic. From that point on, Elvis and Tom would meet again and again, in hotel rooms, in late-night clubs, and eventually in moments neither of them could have predicted. But this meeting, this night, was where the curtain first lifted. Elvis Presley had seen countless performers try to imitate him. The curled lips, the pelvic thrusts, the swagger. Some were flattering, most were laughable, but when he saw Tom Jones perform, he didn't see a copy. He saw something else entirely. Something raw, something dangerous, something real. After that first encounter in Vegas, Elvis couldn't stop talking about Tom. According to those closest to him, Elvis would watch tapes of Tom's performances backstage and whisper, "That boy can sing. He's got fire in his soul." But Tom's impression of Elvis? That was something deeper. Tom saw through the rhinestones and the sunglasses. Beneath the showbiz exterior, there was a man, brilliant, exhausted, searching. A man who carried the weight of being Elvis. Presley everywhere he went, even when it crushed him. Tom once told a friend, he wasn't what people thought. He was soft-spoken, gentle and lonely. So lonely. That surprised him. To the world, Elvis was the ultimate alpha, the king, the rebel, the icon. But when they were alone, Elvis wasn't trying to impress anyone. He didn't need to. He was introspective, even insecure. Fame hadn't spoiled him. It had scarred him. What drew Elvis to Tom was authenticity. Tom didn't kiss up. He didn't treat Elvis like a god. He treated him like a fellow musician. An equal. And Tom wasn't just another pretty face with a voice. He had soul. His voice could rattle a chandelier or whisper like a hymn. It was masculine and vulnerable, controlled chaos wrapped in velvet. Their chemistry was instant. When they sang together, it was like two thunderstorms colliding, gospel harmonies, improvised blues riffs, laughter between verses, no managers, no handlers, just music. One night, Elvis told Tom, "I don't have many friends in this business, but you're one of them." Coming from Elvis, that wasn't casual flattery. That was sacred. And Tom knew it. They began meeting regularly, sometimes in the early hours of the morning, long after the curtain had dropped. Other times they'd bump into each other in Vegas lobbies, both surrounded by handlers and fans. But when their eyes met, the world would fade. One of the most iconic moments came when Elvis surprised Tom by walking out on stage during one of his Vegas shows. Tom didn't flinch. He didn't stop the music. He turned, grinned, and the two of them danced and sang together like they were back in that hotel dressing room. The audience erupted, not just because two superstars were sharing a stage, but because they saw something real, a bond, a brotherhood. But there was always something unspoken between them too, an awareness of the ticking clock. Even in those vibrant moments, Tom could see it in Elvis's eyes, a kind of sadness that lingered behind the smile. A man slipping away, one show at a time. Tom never asked too many questions. He respected the silence, but he never forgot that look. The first impression? It was unforgettable. Two giants from different worlds, finding common ground not in fame, but in something far more rare in their world. Truth. By the late 1960s, Tom Jones and Elvis Presley had both become symbols of male superstardom. Not just singers, but sex symbols, cultural icons, lightning rods for attention. But behind the headlines and stage lights was a shared burden few could understand. The crushing pressure of being adored by millions while constantly questioned, critiqued, and commodified. Elvis had been carrying that weight far longer. Since Heartbreak Hotel, his life had been shaped and suffocated by handlers, studios, and most infamously, Colonel Tom Parker, the manager who treated Elvis less like an artist and more like a product. Every move was choreographed. Every decision, filtered through dollar signs. Tom, though newer to the scene, was quickly catching up. By 1967, he was starring in his own TV variety show, This Is Tom Jones, rubbing shoulders with royalty and rock stars alike. But the fame machine never slept. The image had to be maintained, the voice, the look, the mystery. There was no off switch. That's why their friendship meant so much. When Elvis and Tom were together, there were no agents, no contracts, no expectations. Just two men who knew the cost of what they had achieved. Tom once confided in an interview, "When we were alone, we didn't talk about music business stuff. We talked about being tired, about needing space, about how sometimes we just wanted to go home." And perhaps more importantly, neither tried to outshine the other. In an industry bloated with egos, their bond was refreshingly ego-free. Elvis admired Tom's control on stage, the way he commanded a room with just a look, a growl, a pause before the final chorus. And Tom was mesmerized by Elvis's presence, how he could transform silence into electricity, how his very stillness could cause a crowd to hold its breath. But it wasn't all heavy talks and shared pain. There were lighthearted moments too, spontaneous jam sessions, private jokes, late-night pranks, even double dates when schedules aligned. In those rare windows, they weren't superstars. They were just men, laughing, venting, singing their way through the chaos. Still, there was always an edge of melancholy. Tom sensed that Elvis was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Not just physically tired, spiritually tired. The kind of exhaustion that came from years of being everyone's fantasy and no one's reality. And while Tom still had some control over his path, Elvis seemed trapped in his. He couldn't tour internationally. He couldn't record freely. Even his TV specials were edited within an inch of their soul. Tom once said, "He was the most famous man in the world, and yet he had the least freedom of any of us." It's easy to look at their lives from the outside and see only glamour. But the truth is, the fame that brought them together was also what isolated them. And in each other, they found a rare and vital mirror, someone who knew what it meant to have everything, and yet still feel the ache of something missing. Mutual respect wasn't just about talent. It was about survival. They didn't just admire each other's voices, they admired each other's endurance. And as we turn the page into the next chapter of their story, one that grows darker, it's important to remember that what they built was more than friendship. Beyond the roar of the crowds and the sparkle of stage lights, there was another world, quieter, hidden, sacred. It was in the corners of hotel suites and the shadows of backstage lounges where Elvis Presley and Tom Jones built a bond few ever saw. And at the heart of that bond was the music, not for the cameras, not for the charts, but for each other. In the early 1970s, whenever both men were in Las Vegas, the routine became familiar. After the show, when the screaming stopped and the tuxedos loosened, the real magic began. Elvis would often invite Tom to his penthouse suite at the International Hotel. These weren't parties filled with Hollywood elites or hangers-on. These were musical retreats. Imagine it. A grand piano in the corner, dim lighting, a few close friends seated in silence, waiting. Elvis would nod, Tom would sit at the keys or grab a guitar, and the night would unfold. Gospel, blues, soul, songs they grew up with, songs the world had forgotten. songs that never made the charts but lived in their bones. One of Elvis's longtime friends, Jerry Schilling, once said, "Those were the nights Elvis came alive, when it was just him and Tom and the music they loved. They'd trade harmonies on Mahalia Jackson hymns or improvise verses to Chuck Berry riffs. Sometimes they'd go for hours without speaking a word, just singing, eyes closed, lost in the rhythm. These weren't rehearsals. They were therapy." Tom later shared, "Those jam sessions were the only time I saw him truly relaxed. He wasn't Elvis the icon. He was just a man who needed to sing. And Elvis didn't take those moments lightly. Despite his immense fame, he often told Tom, 'These nights are what keep me going.'" Coming from a man who had everything, money, power, the adoration of millions, it was a stunning confession. Their friendship wasn't about fame. It was built on a shared need to reconnect with the why, the reason they ever picked up a mic in the first place. Music was their home, and in those secret jam sessions they returned to it like pilgrims. Occasionally, someone new would join, a backing musician, a trusted friend. But only if they understood the rules. No recording devices, no talking over the music, no ego. This was a sacred space. One night, around 4 a.m., Elvis pulled out an old, barely tuned acoustic guitar and strummed the first notes of "Blue Moon of Kentucky." Tom joined in without missing a beat. They sang in harmony, two voices, one southern drawl, one Welsh growl, merging into something bigger than either could create alone. There was a stillness afterward. No applause. Just silence, like the world had stopped to listen. Those moments were rare, even in their own lives. In a world where every interaction was scrutinized, every word reported, these sessions remained untouched by publicity. Elvis never bragged about them. Tom never sold stories to the tabloids, because to both men, this wasn't celebrity. The world saw Elvis Presley as untouchable, a man so larger than life that even his failures seemed mythic. He was the king, the rebel in rhinestones, the man who could silence an arena with a single note. But Tom Jones saw something far more complicated, something fragile. The first time Tom saw it was during one of their late-night hangouts in Vegas. Elvis had just performed a sold-out show to thunderous applause. The audience couldn't get enough, the screaming, the flashing cameras, the chaos. But in his suite afterward, Elvis sat quietly in the corner, staring into a glass of water. Not whiskey, not champagne, just water. Tom, still buzzing from his own performance, walked in, expecting conversation or music. Instead, he found a man hollowed out. "You ever feel like you're not even here?" Elvis asked quietly without looking up. Tom didn't answer right away, because he knew exactly what Elvis meant. Fame had become a costume, and Elvis had worn it for so long he couldn't tell where the costume ended and the man began. There were other moments too. Moments that revealed just how deeply Elvis had been wounded by the machine that built him. He talked about his mother, Gladys, in ways the public never heard. Her death had shattered him. Not because he lost a parent, but because she was the only person who saw him, not the icon. After she passed, Elvis drifted, emotionally and spiritually, and no amount of success could bring him back. He spoke of Colonel Parker with complicated reverence, calling him a genius one moment and a jailer the next. Elvis knew he was being used. He knew the international tours he longed for would never happen. But he was trapped contractually and psychologically. The king of rock and roll was just another commodity, passed from one casino deal to the next. Sometimes, he'd retreat into long silences, gazing out the window at the endless Nevada desert, as if searching for a road out. Tom watched all of this with a kind of helpless understanding. He never tried to fix Elvis. He knew better than that. He simply sat with him. He didn't need advice, Tom once said. He needed peace, and sometimes the only peace he found was in music or silence. There were other cracks in the armor too. Elvis worried about aging, about losing relevance, about becoming a parody of himself. He once joked, "One day I'll just be a Halloween costume," and laughed. But there was no humor in his eyes. Tom never saw Elvis take them during their jam sessions. That part of Elvis was kept behind another door, but he knew, everyone did, and no one knew how to stop it. That was part of the tragedy. Elvis wasn't surrounded by villains. He was surrounded by people who loved him, but didn't know how to save him. He once said, there was a sadness in him, so deep it was like a shadow you could never quite touch. The man the world called a god was, in truth, unbearably human, full of dreams, regrets, and fears no one ever allowed him to express. Except maybe to one person, a singer from Wales who sat beside him in the quiet hours, listening not with his ears but with his soul. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being surrounded and still feeling unseen. Tom Jones witnessed that loneliness up close in Elvis Presley, not on the stage where the lights masked everything, but in the silence that came after, in the limousines, the hotel rooms, the empty corridors lined with velvet and gold, places where echoes lived longer than people. Elvis was never without company, not technically. His entourage, the so-called Memphis Mafia, was always within arm's reach. Bodyguards, assistants, old friends from back home. But presence isn't the same as connection. Tom saw it in Elvis's eyes. That constant scanning of the room, not for threats, but for something real. Someone real. One night in 1972, after a long evening of music and laughter, Tom lingered behind as everyone else filed out of the suite. Elvis sat in a gold-accented armchair, strumming his guitar mindlessly, eyes half-closed. Here was a man who had everything: unimaginable fame, fortune, women, power, confessing that what he missed most was being unknown. Being free. He saw how Elvis craved normalcy but couldn't reach it. How he longed for a walk down the street without security, a meal without fans, a conversation without expectation. He watched Elvis grow quieter with each passing year, less animated, more withdrawn. The king was becoming a ghost in his own castle. He couldn't tour abroad. Parker wouldn't allow it. He couldn't choose his film roles. Those were chosen for him. He couldn't even select his opening acts without a long approval chain. Everything was filtered through handlers, every moment scheduled, every movement calculated. Tom, who'd managed to maintain some control over his own career, found it heartbreaking. He later said, Elvis had the world at his feet, but not a moment to himself. In a cruel twist of irony, the man most idolized on earth had nowhere to truly belong.